All right, welcome back to the Six Scale Scavengers podcast. This is your host, Brian Fontaine, joined, as always, by my good friend, Chris Letty. We've got some news to talk about, and that's probably the understatement of the year because I think, Chris, this is probably our most jam-packed news episode we've ever had. We got a fun little topic to go over from our private Facebook group. And Chris, we've got a new feature figure to review at the end of the episode. You've got this one in hand. We're going to be reviewing Hela from Thor Ragnarok. Chris, I feel like we got to just get into this. This is the first time that you and I have been able to record in daylight and not when we're both literally probably falling asleep. I've actually got a cup of coffee in hand with my Shore Trooper mug. Surprise, surprise, from our last episode.
Yeah, man, it feels awesome. Feels good to get this in. It felt right. Good thing we delayed it till this morning because even more news dropped. I mean, we just got so much to talk about as far as that goes.
Most people will know, unless you've been living under a rock, that the lottery, the Mega Millions right now, Chris, is projected to be $1.6 billion on Tuesday afternoon. This is that'll be tomorrow night from the time we're recording. And you and I have been throwing some ideas around. We have a tendency, this will probably surprise none of our listeners, that we refer to hot toys almost as a form of currency. And a lot of the things that we need to get done, either it's a bill or coming up or an expense that you didn't really expect. You're like, oh, this tree that's got to come down is going to cost me about 3 hot toys.
Yeah, I know that particular thing all too well, as I had to have a tree cut down this week. But yeah, man, that lottery, it's just mental. $1.6 billion. I hope that more than one person wins. I hope it's me. I hope it's you. I hope it's one of our listeners. Yeah, I'll definitely be getting my tickets. I mean, even the Powerball's a crazy amount right now. Oh, how my mind can wander when thinking about winning the lottery.
So, Chris, if we put that $1.6 billion into a form of hot toys currency, I just randomly picked an average sale price of a hot toy of $250, which probably feels like it's on the lower end when you factor in all the cool Iron Man figures we're going to talk about briefly. That's 6.4 million hot toys. You could have all of them. You could have multiple versions of all of them.
You could own Hot Toys the company at that price.
You're not that wrong. Or maybe you could rent out the Hong Kong secret base for a couple weeks or something, just for fun.
Fun things to think about.
Yeah, speaking of fun things to think about, we've got Spooktacular coming up. Spooktacular 2018 from Sideshow. A couple episodes we wanted to kind of give everybody a preview of what to expect, and there's still a whole bunch of questions and stuff surrounding it. So I think one of the cool things is I feel like there's going to be a lot more involvement and awareness of their contest this year. Put on by Sideshow. Got to run from October 24th to the 31st, so a couple days from now of this recording. And basically, Chris, we talked about it, but if we have new listeners to the podcast or they're not quite sure what to expect, Sideshow drops promo codes that are reward codes. You have to punch it in onto their Spooktacular landing page that they'll have up and running, and you enter the code, and you got to make sure that you're signed into your Sideshow account. And basically these dollar amounts just start piling up in your rewards balance, which is great because it's money that you can use almost immediately to start pre-ordering figures, used towards any figures that are in stock. It's going to be like this just week-long craziness. I know a lot of the larger collecting groups are out there. One of our favorites at Tashi Station 16, the Full Scale Collectibles on Facebook. John Martino does an excellent job over there as one of the admins, and they've already got their post up and running. They've got a private Facebook Messenger group that as soon as some of these codes start dropping, you got to get notified. You got to have your phones turned on. Chris, you shared an article in our Facebook group the other day about how to turn on notifications from Sideshow on Twitter and Instagram. Just get ready, folks. It's going to be fun.
I just signed up to that group. John added me to the Facebook Messenger group, and definitely read the rules because You don't want to get booted for posting anything other than the code if you are able to find it before anybody else. Stay tuned for that. I just turned on my notifications for Instagram and Twitter for Sideshow. Hopefully, we'll be able to attain as many rewards points as possible. They'll be coming from all different avenues, from just their regular posts to posts in some of their live videos and stuff like that. I mean, you got to take advantage. It's basically free money. You just kind of stay up on things this week, and yeah, man, you'll be able to use all that rewards points to towards Hot Toys.
Usually a lot of the phrases are common nerd stuff, like Chewy or Hoth, or just very basic words. It's not you have to worry about like having like an encryption key that you need to enter. They're usually phrases and keywords from nerddom. I would say they go quick too. And some of them have, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes of only availability before they turn them off. The daily ones that they drop in their email newsletter tend to be available throughout the day. And it's usually at the very bottom of the newsletter. Obviously, once you get the newsletter, pop the code in. Don't wait to say, oh, well, I'll do it later. And I think the other thing we got to stress too, this is all for fun. I mean, yes, it's free money. This is a great thing that Sideshow does to get everybody excited about their own products, Hot Toys, everything that they do. No one is going to probably get all of them. And if you miss one, yeah, it's disappointing, but you don't have to throw a temper tantrum either. There'll be another one. I think I had said last year, I was pretty dialed into it last year, and I think I only got about half of them. But that's like $40 or $45 that I didn't have before. And it's all for fun. So definitely give it a look if you haven't done so already.
Now, you mentioned numbers from last year. What was the highest total rewards you had heard?
I want to say it was upwards of $80 or $90.
Okay.
So not going to get you a full Hot Toy, but some of these pre-orders we're going to be talking about here coming up, it's going to be a good head start for a lot of that. Yeah, I can't wait. Speaking of great conversations and stuff, Chris, we're going to give a quick plug for our Facebook group before we get into the news. And a lot of great new members have joined up since our last episode. It's great that word of mouth has really kind of kicked in with our little podcast here. I'm going to give the disclaimer that I usually do. Chris and I, we're not experts. We're doing this for fun. We have a passion about this. We want to learn from our audience. And man, I've done so much learning and stuff in the last week or so on this group. The varying levels of experience people have with collecting Hot Toys. It's just been great. And it's nice to know that we've kind of cut out a little section of a community here. The discussions are just great. I mean, on a daily basis, there's a few folks that they're constantly putting things out and generating interesting conversation. And I just love it. It's great.
I enjoy all the tidbits and different tricks and stuff that our fellow collectors are putting in there for us to dig in deeper and just see what else is out there. Steven and Ryan and Jason and PJ, like all these great collectors that have joined our group, we're just hoping that we can keep this thing growing and just share all the information that we have and just have fun with it. And yeah, it's just been a good time.
And we're certainly not making any money or anything off this. Our checklists on brickcityblockade.com, the referral links and stuff to eBay and Amazon, we're able to kind of keep the lights on every month, just covering our hosting costs with people that are willing to check those out and click through and do that. So we're super appreciative of that. We're not going to try to hit up anybody for any money or anything. My goal is just making sure that we don't have to cover the measly $15 or so to host on Libsyn. That's my goal for this podcast.
Yep, that's pretty much it. We'll just sharing this with everybody else and not ask too much of you guys.
All right, Chris, let's jump over to news. And holy cow. And without fail, anytime we drop a new episode, the following morning, it's inevitable that there's going to be a new figure that drops. You and I have not had a chance to talk too much about the Bucky Barnes from Infinity War that dropped one day after our last episode released. MMS 509, retail price $243. projected to be released July 2019 to September 2019. Chris, this is a figure that we've seen on display at a lot of the trade shows at San Diego Comic-Con. What are your thoughts about this one?
I'm digging this figure. The likeness to Sebastian Stan, Bucky Barnes is, I mean, pretty much spot on with the prototype. The design of the outfit, his arm, his Wakandan arm, it just looks amazing. I think, the release date says July to September, but the way these Infinity War figures are going, I would not be surprised if it gets released earlier. Yeah, I'm all in on this figure. We'll talk about it a little bit later.
I am getting very tempted by this one, and I think you had made the point to me where I have a Captain America focus in my collection. This would fit in pretty well right next to that, and I think there's been some pretty fantastic figures they've done of Winter Soldier so far in Captain America Winter Soldier, and then in Captain America Civil War. This one looks pretty good, and I'm also very intrigued by it. Speaking of those Infinity War early releases, and we've kind of talked about it the last few episodes, but Thor from Infinity War released in Hong Kong last week on October 16th. Looks like it's projected to ship in North America this week, and actually days from when we're recording this. We've already seen quite a few people posting reviews and pictures and whatnot online about this figure from overseas, Chris. And this is another one of those figures that I'm very tempted by because it just looks phenomenal in hand.
The in-hand photos of this figure just really take it to that next level. We talk about the promo photos, it's the prototypes, and then some people do a lot of great photography on Instagram and stuff like that, but a lot of Photoshop is used and to emphasize those figures. But the in-hand photos of this figure really set it above. And I think got this thing on payment plan. I'm waiting until maybe some of our Facebook group members get it in hand before I make a decision if I'm going to keep it on that payment plan or go early on, do a one-time payment. We'll see. I can't wait for it. It'll look good with our feature figure here of this episode.
Absolutely. And keeping that train running of that trend of these Infinity War figures dropping a lot earlier. And there's been some speculation about why that's happening and whether it's that Marvel Studios really wants to start that promotion train for Captain Marvel, for Avengers 4 that's currently untitled, and make sure that people don't start looking already past these Infinity War figures. It'll be interesting to see if that speculation is spot on. But this past week, Chris, I got an email just like you did that a lot of our other collectors out there that are fans of Captain America. I was a little disappointed the last episode we talked about the concept art Captain America getting pushed back to November. But November is going to be a very good month for Captain America fans because the Infinity War version of Captain America got moved up potentially to November through January. It was originally projected, I believe, between April and June. And I am just over the moon excited about this. This is the movie promo edition or the standard release. And we haven't seen any additional further prototypes of this. It has not released in Hong Kong yet, but I have to think that that's coming up pretty soon. If they're projecting that Sideshow will have it to start potentially shipping in November.
I would not be surprised to see it within the next month or so dropping in Hong Kong. And it'll be interesting to see what the head sculpt looks like with the one going to consumers, because a prototype, it looks great, but in certain angles doesn't quite look like Chris Evans, in my opinion. But I'm really excited for this figure. I got him on payment plan too. I don't know. Might have to switch it to a one-time payment. We'll see. Imagine if both Captain America's released in November. I think my co-host over here will be jumping for joy.
I also have that one, I think, on a 3-month payment plan. So I think it's projected to start in November. So I don't know. It's highly unlikely that it probably will ship in November. But if Sideshow says, "Hey, Mr. Fontaine, would you like to start paying this off early?" and before they even finish the email, I think I'll have clicked submit on that. Just because I did not expect it to get there, and it's Captain Frickin' America. Another early, well, actually, no, this was not an early release, but we finally got Kylo Ren from The Last Jedi dropped in Hong Kong. Looks like it's going to start shipping soon over North America from Sideshow. That dropped on October 18th, and obviously the final prototype photos were shared. Looks fantastic. I honestly think they improved the Adam Driver face sculpt on this one. The painting looks on the face looks a lot better than I feel like it did in the promo. He doesn't look so pasty white. And this was not a figure that I'm probably going to get. It's tempting to add it to a Last Jedi final battle on crate scene with the crate Luke that we talked about with last month. I tend not to collect the villains from Star Wars, but I have to hand it to Hot Toys on this one. I feel like they improved on the prototype with this.
Yeah, I agree. The face sculpt looks amazing. It's tough with some of the, it seems like a lot of the Star Wars figures seem to hang around for a little while as far as availability goes. I can see this figure once it gets released to be available for a little while. So it might be one of those ones that you can use some rewards points to once people get it in hand. But yeah, great looking figure, and it goes great with another figure that came out just today.
So this was last Thursday. On Friday, we might as well just have last Friday as Iron Man Day, because, well, not quite Iron Man Day. It was like the 2-day Iron Man just onslaught from Hot Toys and all the detractors of Iron Man Hot Toy figures. Just every time something like that drops, and I feel like 4 or 5 episodes ago we had broken down the numbers, and it was something like 20% of all the figures that Hot Toys has released under the Marvel line has been something Iron Man related. So, there's some credence to that, but we finally got the official drop of the concept art Mark 46 that we saw teased at San Diego Comic-Con. Kind of a surprise drop. I had a feeling it was probably going to get released and announced pretty quickly, because the Captain America one was coming out soon. And it's both kind of on that Marvel's the first 10 years subline that the Hot Toys is going to be releasing with the concept artist Ryan Menderling from Marvel Studios. Chris, this one looks pretty good, I'll have to say. The price at $377 seems high, but a little bit lower than what most of the other Iron Man figures have been coming. But as most people have pointed out, this one lacks a Robert Downey Jr. head sculpt. And I think that's probably why we're not seeing a mid $450 price tag on this one. This is one of the figures I've been window shopping a little bit lately, because it looks obviously exactly like the Mark 46 and the Mark 47. It just has that different paint scheme. And it's just, at certain times, it looks really cool, Chris, but then other times it just looks, it's basically inverse from what we're used to seeing. And I feel like it looks more true to the comic books than it does the MCU. And I think that's probably why I like it, but not sure I love it.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly what I thought. It looks just like the comics, not necessarily what's going on now with the comics, but like older Iron Man imagery. And it looks like another solid release from Hot Toys. But for me, I am getting the concept cap, but I can't, unlikely to go for this one. It's just, it's another Iron Man for those completists, and I don't know. For me, it's one of those ones I can easily say I'm all set with.
So this one's going to come out pretty quick too. It's got a January 2019 to March 2019 release date. Doesn't surprise me, because they're trying to make it come out fairly quickly and fairly soon, right after that concept art cap that we keep talking about. Last Friday, Chris. So that was on Thursday. On Friday, they might as well have just called it Hulkbuster Day because I think a lot of people had forgotten that they had been teasing for a while an updated Hulkbuster Deluxe. And some people had the RSVPs with Sideshow, and obviously once they're ready to release a figure, they start blasting everybody's emails saying, hey, by the way, this is going to be available. They didn't stop there. So they have the Hulkbuster Deluxe, which actually has a whole new MMS number. It's not strictly a reissue. It's MMS 510. Get ready for this, Chris. Price tag of $1,150. Projected to release January 2020.
Yikes.
Exactly, yikes. The reason why it's kind of a reissue of the original one that people that had missed out, and that secondary market for the Hulkbuster has just almost, you're fetching almost double what it went for. It's, I've seen a lot of them out there for $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 on eBay. And some people are probably going to feel a little jaded if they had the original one. Well, they're making one of those accessory sets that we've talked about in the past. So for $251, you can get the extra Hulkbuster arm that was going to be coming with the Deluxe and the Veronica accessory piece. It's not obviously in scale or anything. That if you want to essentially upgrade your current Hulkbuster, you're going to have exactly the same figure and you'll be able to have a savings. I think somebody had figured it out on one of the groups. It's about a $75 inflation rate from basically earlier this year. Not terrible by any means. And that's going to be the kind of the cost. So if you had gotten the original one and you get the accessory set, you're basically going to save about $75 or so. Not terrible. Not to be outdone, Chris. And you and I have been trying to do as much digging about this as possible because, as we talked about in our last episode, I've only been collecting now over a year. You're at about 10 months. A lot of these things that we know and learn, we're just either finding out secondhand, firsthand experience, or going back and researching. As far as you and I can tell, this is going to be the first time that Hot Toys has reissued a previous release verbatim. This is the Iron Man Mark 43 from Age of Ultron. Obviously, they're reissuing it so that it will be able to sit inside the Hulkbuster. There's a figure, Chris, that was released in 2015 for $344.99. The reissue version of this, which is going to be available next July, is $360. So that's not a bad inflation rate increase from 3 years. Actually, it'll end up being 4 years later.
Definitely not. I thought I was expecting it to be higher than that. This whole reissuing has kind of blown my mind with the Hulkbuster and this particular Iron Man. We kind of talked about it. It was either last episode or a couple episodes ago. If Hot Toys looks and sees what things are doing on the secondary market, some of their older figures, and if they would consider reissuing with maybe slight updates as far as accessories, and here Hot Toys is doing it, and they're doing it with their biggest and craziest figure release to date. Initially I'm like, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. You see all the people's pictures with the figure and setup and the size and the weight. It really got me thinking. And it even got to the point where I dreamt about pre-ordering this figure. And when I woke up in the morning, I had to double check to make sure that I hadn't done that. So it's invading my dreams, and I'm going to kind of give it a hard thought for a while. I kind of looked at the numbers, breaking it down. I mean, you can break it out to, I think, as many as 9 payments or something like that. But break down 2 payments towards the end of next year into the following year. It kind of project it for my budget for 2020. I don't know. I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about Mark 43 also. I was thinking about Mark 7. That's the one I was thinking about. A great looking figure, but I might shift gears a little to make this thing happen. But I do have to add one thing. I don't have a Hulk yet, and I'm passing on Gladiator Hulk. You think they'll reissue Age of Ultron Hulk? Because the secondary market prices are kind of crazy for that one, too.
This is a whole new realm of possibility. And this is just my hunch. This isn't completely out there, and it's certainly not anything spoiler related because Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., they're probably not going to be part of Marvel's Studios Phase 4. And I feel like the nostalgia for a lot of these guys that are going to be available. I personally don't think they're going to off Iron Man or Captain America. I feel like, as we talk about with our Star Wars podcast on the Brick City Blockade, they'll maybe put the characters on a shelf for a little bit to come back and potentially come back as a different actor. Or, with this whole the time continuum thing from Ant-Man and the Wasp, it makes it a little bit easier, maybe like they do in the comics, is going back in time, grabbing a character and pulling them forward to the future so that they still have that character available to them. It's just a different version from maybe a different reality. And that whole mind bending thing is just completely crazy. But long story short, people like you and I, that we were around for the start of the MCU, and even thinking about it like 10 years later, anybody that's young and coming up and is getting into this, like, those, if there's ever another Captain America or Iron Man, like, they'll be that generation's Captain America or Iron Man. I feel like ours are going to be Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., and these armors that we're used to seeing. I honestly don't see people going away from these anytime soon. And I think if anything, we'll talk about in the collection update. I've been doing a lot of window shopping lately. I only have currently one Iron Man in my collection, and, seeing the Iron Man completists out there, we have several in the group that have quite a few of them. And it's like, oh man, they're just so cool. I don't know. I don't think this is going to be the last Iron Man we see reissued.
I don't think it's going to be the last figure we see reissued. Hot Toys, they're probably going to see how collectors respond to this idea and see how well it does. I hope that's kind of the way to go. For the collectors that have been with Hot Toys since day one, essentially, I know it's kind of a bummer to have figures released. We see it with Hasbro re-releasing figures like in the Black Series line and 3 3/4 inch line. A lot of people have issues with that, ones that have stayed the course. But for newer collectors, I think it gives a opportunity to buy something brand new. And I would think that Hot Toys would want to get that money instead of these collectors buying stuff from the secondary market. Again, it's going to be something we'll see how things go. We'll kind of chronicle with you guys where Hot Toys is going to go with this whole idea. But I hope it's the case. I hope that's kind of how they sprinkle in different figures here and there, and in between the movies. But you get the other side of it is like, well, we want new figures, we want new characters and stuff like that, not just reissues. But again, this might just be a testing ground for them.
Well, if anything is going by the buzz in the collecting community for all of these things, Hot Toys has got a winner on their hands with this one. So we'll obviously keep our thumb on the pulse of what's going on with this in future episodes. All right, Chris, we got some breaking news as of this morning, so we don't have a ton of detail about this, but we did want to make sure that it got included with this episode. Leia Organa from The Last Jedi. Everybody kind of had a hunch that one's probably going to be dropping pretty soon. So that dropped in Hong Kong. Actually, this morning, they put out all the glamour shots and updated versions of this. Chris, this is a figure that I probably didn't have any intention of adding to my collection at all. When this was first announced, I think this was actually announced after the movie had come out, that I feel like they had missed the mark on Carrie Fisher's likeness for this figure initially in the prototypes. I don't feel like they had aged her enough. Fast forward to October 2018 here, and I feel like they made a huge improvement on this. It looks more like Carrie Fisher did in The Last Jedi. Obviously, throw out all your Mary Poppins jokes and whatnot. And, again, the one thing I'll talk about this, we love Star Wars. We love the MCU. We're not here to be film critics. We know, I think we talked about it last time out. People love the movie. People hate the movie. I think that's why we focus on the characters and not necessarily the movies, because, if you're a Princess Leia fan and you love Carrie Fisher, then I feel like this one's got to be a must in your collection if you fall into that category.
Right. We all have our little things about the movies and that sort of thing, but with these figures, it's all about the character. It's all about the likeness, the accuracy, and that Hot Toys team, they went back to the drawing board. It looks like and knocked it out of the park. I can't get over some of those promo images. It straight up looks like Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia in the movie. It's amazing. I think, it'll be interesting to see how well the figure does, but as far as nailing that likeness, I think they did it. No question about it.
Another figure that got dropped this morning, and I don't feel like we've seen this anywhere, is we were going to get another Deadpool from Deadpool 2. This one from the final scene in the movie, and it seems kind of funny. They're calling it a dusty version of Deadpool 2, and you don't have to check your earbuds on this. Yes, he's going to look dusty, and I've already seen some early chatter on the collecting groups of like, okay, well, I'm just going to take my current Deadpool 2 figure and I'm just going to leave him outside my glass case for a few months, and lo and behold, I'll probably end up with the same thing.
I know it seems kind of ridiculous. It is. It's definitely a version from the movie. I think the execution in the promo images looks amazing. It looks just like him in the movies. I know there's a couple little details that they may have missed with some duct tape here or there, or a fence spike through the head, or so. But it's neat. I don't know. It's not really my thing. I think some of the criticism already is like, maybe this should have been a different character, been one of the other characters from the movie, but we won't get into all that. There's licensing deals that Hot Toys has with the movie companies and that sort of thing. So, but it's an exclusive. We don't have word. I was trying to do some digging this morning to see if anybody had any news on what it was exclusive to, but we'll probably find that out in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, this one is MMS 505. So actually, sequentially in the movie Masterpiece series line that we're talking about, actually comes before the Crate Luke, comes before the Bespin Leia, and even before like Hulkbuster and stuff. So number wise, it's actually going to come before some of these, and it looks like it's going to come out fall to winter 2019. So to me, this doesn't scream straight reissue. I think this is an entirely new, not necessarily sculpt, but obviously they're going to have to redo the costume and whatnot. And we have not taken the time to do a full comparison between the figure that was just released for Deadpool 2 versus this one. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure that as time goes by here, we'll get a little bit more information. As of the time of recording, we don't even have this up on Sideshow yet, because that won't happen for a few more hours from now. So we don't even know what the price point of that would be. I'd have to guess that it's probably going to be a little bit more than the current release was, just because it's exclusive. But from there, we don't know what exclusive it is. If it's going to be for an upcoming trade show, is it only going to be available overseas? Is it only going to be available here in North America? We don't know, but as soon as we find out, we'll talk about it on a future episode. All right, Chris, let's shift gears. We have given little tidbits here and there, but as we usually do, we'll give a collection update. And for the second week in a row, it's fairly ho-hum, but I do know that there is something that you have added to your pre-order list.
I did pre-order Infinity War Bucky Barnes, the White Wolf. The last episode, I had talked about having that $20 rewards coupon, and I didn't know what to use it for. And thankfully, this guy dropped and used that towards Bucky. I'm looking forward to this figure. I had held off on getting any sort of Winter Soldier Bucky version to date. some of the prices were a little bit higher than I wanted to pay, and I knew that the initial release had some issues with some of the material on the jacket and that sort of thing. So held out for this guy. Looking forward to it. Finished product, pretty close to the prototype. Looking forward to that guy. Got him on payment plan. I changed things up a little bit. We talked last episode again about canceling stuff, deciding to move on from things, and I had that little Ant-Man and the Wasp diorama on pre-order, so it was $48. After thinking about it, I decided to cancel, and I didn't get hit with any sort of loss for a initial deposit. So we just used that money towards Bucky. And then something else unfortunate happened with my collection. My first figure faux pas. I don't know if some of you guys saw. I had made up a little scene with our feature figure and my Dark World Thor, kind of recreating the Mighty Thor issue 150, where it was Hela's first cover appearance. And as I took Thor out of the package, I noticed his ankle was a little bit wobbly. And then I went to position him laying down, and his ankle joint broke. Not the ball joint, but the actual part, the lower portion of the leg where that ball joint snaps into. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do for a repair, do some research, and probably post a picture of that, seeing what you guys, our listeners, have for a potential solution. So total bummer.
Oh, yeah. That's brutal. That is very brutal. I don't have anything to that extent. I know I've broken the shield strap on my stealth cap, and you see it happening in slow motion, and it's just, you're just like, oh crap, because you know how these things are not cheap by any means, and we try to treat them carefully as can be. And I think we also have to remember, at the end of the day, I mean, they are collectibles. They are fragile, and they certainly are great to look at, but we also have to be careful. And yeah, so if anybody has a potential solution for that, reach out to Chris on social media, or jump into our Facebook group. They give him a hand, but give him a foot.
Oh man, you're something else.
Yeah, I've got no updates. Again, I didn't cancel anything this time. I still have all the pre-orders there. Chris, I've done a lot of window shopping. I think I'm waiting for the Sideshow Spooktacular promo codes to come and go, just because I can help offset some of that upcoming cost. And looking at my budget, I have room to add a few figures, but as I said with a little bit ago with the Iron Man figures, and I actually, before the Hulkbuster had even dropped, I had looked, I'm like, okay, well, the concept art Mark 46 and the Mark II and the Mark IV, and Infinity War Mark 50, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. And that was even before the Hulkbuster dropped. So sometimes it's very good to not make any rash decisions when it comes to these, just because of the high cost of them. But it certainly doesn't hurt to sleep on it a little bit. I still have yet to take any action on anything. I think my budget and wallet thanks me for that, and we'll see. Maybe by the time we have our next episode, there'll be a figure that is dropped. It's kind of on my wish list. Will then obviously be a day one pre-order. So shifting gears, and speaking of wish lists and figures that have been teased, as I started to do my window shopping, Chris, I started looking at Star Wars releases, and as we've talked about before, they're literally maybe half of what Marvel and the MCU and everything has been able to put out. With 10 films, 10 films, not including the Clone Wars animated movie, there is a lot of figures that they have yet to do, that they still have potential to do, and that part is pretty exciting. From the prequels, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, and even the standalone films. You had teased it last time out with the live action TV series that's coming out on the streaming with The Mandalorian and Jon Favreau and all the potential that could, because we have seen from the Netflix series, we've seen The Punisher and we've seen Daredevil, and there's potential that we could get some of those figures also in Hot Toys form. So it's pretty exciting. And I just started just I threw it out on our Facebook group, and these are figures that have been teased, that they've shown us, that I really would like to add to my collection. And oh, by the way, here's like my wish list. And we talked about that a few episodes ago. Of these are figures we haven't even seen displayed anywhere, but the fact whenever they get shown, they're going to be figures that I'm going to almost immediately want to add. So I threw my lists out there, and it generated a pretty hearty conversation. And I felt like that we had enough submissions from our Facebook group that just for fun here, I wanted to throw out some of the figures that got the most mentions. And of the figures that we've seen teased, and this is just strictly Star Wars, there was 10 different figures mentioned. 6 of them had at least 2 votes. So that's pretty good. And then from a wish list perspective, Chris, we had 35 different figures mentioned, and that I excluded anything from animated or Legends. And of those 35, we had 17 that had multiple votes. So I just wanted to kind of go through some of those, Chris. The characters we've seen teased, not surprisingly, the ones that people are the most interested in, with 5 votes the most, Endor Luke Skywalker. Boo, yes. Next, right after that, with 4 votes, was Leia Endor. We have seen that. Chewbacca from Solo, that had 3 votes. R2-D2 from A New Hope, that we've seen displayed, that had 3. Commander Cody had 3, and then we had 2 votes for Jango Fett. A lot of the great mentions about some of the clone troopers and stuff that they've shown us, the Airborne Trooper and whatnot, the Mimban Trooper, but didn't have multiples. So, Chris, this is where it gets interesting when we talk about a wish list. And of those 17 figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of those only had 2 votes. And I probably won't go into too much detail about those, but the ones that had more than 2, Qui-Gon Jinn had the most with 5. That's surprising to me just because of the general dislike that a lot of people have for the prequel trilogy. But, I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn was a badass Jedi Master. Right after that was his Padawan from The Phantom Menace with Obi-Wan with 4. Padme from Attack of the Clones had 4. X-Wing Luke had 4. 3PO had 4. Hoth Luke had 3. Bespin Han. Just, I sound like Lando there. Hey, Han. Bespin Han had 3, and we have technically seen him, but he hasn't actually been on display. It was displayed with the Bespin Leia. Mace Windu with 3. That's a great choice. I didn't have that on my list. I would definitely add Samuel L. Jackson to my collection. Bespin Lando. Queen Amidala from The Phantom Menace. Followed just after that with Obi-Wan from Attack of the Clones and Lando from the Solo movie, and just a lot of other great ones. So there's potential that a lot of these figures are going to be coming up pretty soon here. Even though we haven't seen these teased, if these are, I think it's sometimes good, Chris, to go through an exercise like this, because you can kind of start, it doesn't sound as crazy as it seems, but to start looking potentially at a 2020 budget, a 2021, 2022, knowing that if these are figures that there's some demand for out there, that if Hot Toys ever gets around to doing them, you're going to have to squeeze these into your budget. And these are all figures and characters from movies that have already been released. That doesn't even factor in what the future of Star Wars is going to be with streaming services, unnamed trilogies that are coming up. It's mind-blowing.
So many figures. It's one of those things where going forward, you could just get a treasure trove of amazing figures, coming our way. And all great choices. The few Star Wars figures that I put on there were Endor Luke and Endor Leia, because I love that part of Return of the Jedi. It's kind of area that I focus in on for vintage Star Wars stuff. So I would go over to the dark side of Star Wars Hot Toys, and I'd get those figures. But man, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, the Phantom Menace, I can see those. We talked episodes ago when Darth Maul came out, that I can see those 2 figures coming out in relation to the 20th anniversary of Phantom Menace next year. And certainly she needs some love in the Hot Toys arena. And just going down the list, if they came out with a Queen Amidala figure, that would just be simply jaw-dropping, the amount of detail that they could put into that figure. And just so many great figures and characters that we need in Hot Toys form. So collectors, definitely make sure there's room in your bank accounts for any of these figures, because I can see them releasing pretty much every single one of these.
It's a exciting time to be a Hot Toys collector for sure. So Chris, we already are pretty close to the 1 hour mark, and we still haven't even got into our feature figures. So this is going to be one of those supersized episodes that we'll have. So hopefully our listeners don't mind. And as we say too, we have our feature figure review. It's for fun. It gets us talking about the figure. We're not experts. We're not going to break it down into the finite detail of it. We're going to be mostly positive about them because obviously they're figures that we wanted to add to our collection, and there will be little things that we can nitpick here and there. But Chris finally had the opportunity to add Hela from Thor Ragnarok to your collection. I'll just give kind of the specs and then I'm going to let you run with this. MMS 449 retails for $235. First teased to us November 8th, 2017. So about 11 months from announcement to shipping. Still available for pre-order on Sideshow. However, it is sold out on Big Bad Toy Store. So Chris, this is a figure that I knew that you were super pumped to get. And let's just start breaking it down.
So this figure was actually the first figure I pre-ordered when I started collecting Hot Toys. It was the first when I jumped on Sideshow. Amazing figures, other ones, but I love Ragnarok. That movie has seriously some of the most rewatchability out of all the MCU films, in my opinion. And as far as Hela goes, the casting of Cate Blanchett is just spot on. And the casting for MCU films is pretty much spot on across the board. But Cate Blanchett really brought something to that character. She just made Hela this badass goddess of death. She just brought her to life, and I loved it. And the promo pics, just they looked amazing. It was a figure that I definitely felt like I needed. Started seeing everybody else getting this figure in hand, and I was getting excited. And once I cracked her open, couldn't get enough of it. So the figure, pretty much, it's extremely movie accurate likeness to Cate Blanchett. Again, the team at Hot Toys nailed this likeness. Got 28 points of articulation. Her suit is really flexible. You can come up with a lot of different poses, so that's good. You just got to be really careful with the fabric. I actually ordered some silk gloves off Amazon because I'm afraid handling some of these figures. I don't want to snag any of the thread. I don't want to ruin any of the outfits and that sort of thing. So definitely, look into that. She's got a bunch of accessories. She's got 7 hands. One of them, the coolest one in my opinion, is the hand crushing Mjolnir when Loki and Thor meet their sister in Norway after Odin has passed on. Just an amazing scene from the movie. Never thought something like that would happen. And Hot Toys, the detail in the accessory just can't get much better. It's got the hand attached to Mjolnir, which is nice. Fits in there great. So she's got, so I said 7 hands, gesturing hands, relaxed hands, and then 2 hands to hold her swords. Because she's the goddess of death, she can create all kinds of crazy weapons. And then actually in the description, they don't list her axe. And that was the additional bonus accessory they later showed. Great accessories, detail, paint on them, the sculpts, everything looks great. Yeah, her costume, let's get into that. She's got a magnetic cape so it's easier to remove and install. She's got a couple different shoulder pieces, and this figure is completely new. Her boots and everything are all specific to the character. Boots have nice paint application on them. I just can't get enough of it. And I can see this figure potentially going up in value in the future just because it's a very specific character. We don't get a ton of the villains, and Hot Toys, I think that this is probably the best villain to date as far as execution of the figure. I know some people might argue with one of the Loki releases, but I'm no regrets. I'm glad I got this figure. I'm glad I got it when I did. And she comes with a base. And yeah, and other than that, the artwork on the box is amazing. Great color scheme. I would display that in it, in itself. But yeah, I'm digging it.
So I'm interested, Chris, and I obviously have seen the images you've been sharing and some of the stuff on social media and whatnot. Curious on the horns on her head, like how sturdy are those? Obviously, you're gonna want to handle it with care, like you mentioned. You mentioned those silk gloves. I'm like, that's not a bad idea. I got to look into that as well. Obviously, I know you're not gonna like pulling on those or anything, but are they fairly sturdy?
They are. There's not much movement to them. They have a little bit of give, so it's not to the point where if you just barely touch it, it's going to break. But everything's molded into the head. Actually, all the spikes it looks like they are glued in place. And you got to be really careful. I mean, they are so sharp that you will break skin if you push on them too hard. They all came with little rubber protectors on each end. So that way, if you put it back in storage, you can have them all protected and that sort of thing. But really be careful with that. You don't want them to get hooked on anything. I will talk about this. As amazing as this head sculpt is, you cannot get any better. One of those things that I would have paid an extra $30, $35 for a head sculpt of Hela without the horns, with her hair down, with sculpted hair. I think would have put this figure into another level. It's already up there, but again, nitpicking, I would have paid the extra money for another head sculpt. I know a lot of collectors feel the same way. With a lot of these figures, it would be just great to have that ability to change up, whatever scene you're setting up and that sort of thing. But no fault to the sculptors or anything like that. I can see maybe some customizers coming up with something in the future, but that's literally my only nitpick for this figure. I couldn't think of anything else I would ask for with this Hela figure. I love it.
All right, so I just decided this on the spot, Chris. We're going to rate this figure based on how many Mjolnirs are, because I've never been able to say that word correctly. And what is that? The Jane Foster's assistant calls it like meow meow or whatever.
Yeah.
So how many Mjolnirs?
Honestly, I won't, think about the head sculpt thing, but I got to give this 4 out of 4 Mjolnirs just because it's a figure that I literally could not ask any more from with what I have in hand. They knocked it out of the park for me. And I recommend going out and getting it. If you're on the fence, get her while she's still on pre-order, because like Yondu, once it goes away, once it sells out, I think this figure, it'll probably go up 15, 20% in the near future. I just looked at eBay sold listings, and there's already some over $300 for this figure. So I don't know why you would pay that much when you can get it for less on Sideshow, but maybe something overseas. Strongly recommend this figure, everybody.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're able to see from a start to completion standpoint of your first figure pre-ordered and having that arrived. I think for me, that was Jedi Luke initially, and you've kind of closed the loop on that. So that's great. I know you've been pretty stoked about that figure, so we'll stay tuned for images of that on social media. We'll have the episode artwork out and available. And Chris, I think it's about that time. We've got our supersized episode here, and we can probably thank all the news that dropped about that and our inherent ramblings about that. So let's get into plug time, Chris. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Vintage Viewport.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jedi Scavenger SW. You can find the Six Scale Scavengers podcast on Instagram at Six Scale Scavengers. And, we want to thank you for listening. And obviously, you're already listening here, but one of the best ways that this little podcast can grow is word of mouth. So if you have any friends or collecting buddies or whatnot that you feel like would like to hear our show, please share it with them. That's definitely going to be the way that we get out there. And you can let them know that they can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and the RSS feed at sixscalescavengers.libsyn.com. We are part of the Brick City Blockade Star Wars Podcast Network. You can find them on all those same fine podcasting, catching paraphernalia things out there. It's been a great episode, Chris. We had a great conversation about Hela and talking about all the news and the Iron Man happenings in the Hot Toys collecting world. So I think that's going to do it, my friend.
Yeah, I don't expect there to be that much news next time around, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right. And as we always say, may the Force be with you.
Always.